Do you remember when MacBooks were white? I do. And today we're going to take this 2010 MacBook and we're going to upgrade it as far as it can go and make it better than it was when it was brand new. Hey everybody, it's Chris from Family Geekery, and today we've got this 2010 white polycarbonate MacBook, and we're going to be upgrading everything inside it. So this model of MacBook was the first Intel-based MacBook that I owned. When I first got into Mac products, I did have a 2007 or 2008 Mac Mini, and that was using the G4 processor, but the first laptop I got was one of these. And for many years, this was my favorite MacBook. Now they went from the old white ones that if you ever saw them, they had chips all along the front palm rest here. You're not going to find one without chips on that. The plastic would chip off. And then they went to a aluminum-based MacBook, I think in 2009. And then they also started at 2009 making this polycarbonate unibody one. And the unibody one was more like the MacBook and much better made. And you don't have the chipping on the plastic like you did on the other ones. And then they went back to the aluminum, which is what they still make today. But when this was out, you were getting basically the guts of a MacBook Pro, but inside a plastic shell, and you were saving a little bit of money. So early on in my days of Macs, where I couldn't afford the newest MacBook, this was the one I got, and I loved it. So let's go ahead and boot this thing up and see what we're starting with, and then I'll show you the parts that I got to upgrade it. Alright, so here it is, all booted up, and you can see the keyboard is a little discolored, but this is, 13 years old, so that's to be expected. So let's see what we're starting with here. So this is a 13-inch mid-2010 2.4 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo, 4 gigabytes of 1067 megahertz RAM, and it's got the NVIDIA GeForce 320M, and let's see what kind of hard drive it's got in it. And it looks like a 320 gigabyte hard drive, a SATA hard drive, and this is running still macOS Lion. Now this is not the original one that I had, that I used for many years. This is one I picked up recently, and it looks like it's never been updated or upgraded. Maybe they put some RAM into it at some point, but it looks pretty stock. So we're going to take this, like I said, we're going to upgrade the RAM, we're going to upgrade the hard drive to an SSD, and we're going to put a new battery in there, because if we look at the battery, it does say service battery. Now it works without the charger in, so it doesn't die immediately like some will. So the battery still has some life in it, but if it says service battery, I'm going to go ahead and put a new one in anyways. Now all these parts are getting cheaper and cheaper every day, so it's almost a no-brainer if you want to play around with something like this to go ahead and upgrade it as much as you can. Now is this going to be a daily driver as soon as I get it all done? No, absolutely not. This will end up to be a computer that you could use for day-to-day tasks, that you could loan out to somebody if they need to borrow something. You could keep it in the kitchen for loading up recipes. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. Now obviously it's not going to upgrade to the latest operating systems and the latest security patches, so do keep that in mind and probably don't trade your $1 million of stocks on it. So let's take a look at the parts that I've got here. Starting off with 16 gigs of RAM. Now you'll see all the time that some of these older ones will say Apple suggests that it only goes up to 8 gigs, but it will actually take 16 gigs. This is one of those models. So this is 16 gigs of DDR3, and it listed as 1066. I see it as 1066, 1067 sometimes. It's basically the same RAM. I've also got a 1 terabyte Timetech 2.5-inch SSD drive. So not the biggest that you can put in it, but it's still going to be plenty of space. And that's going to be a huge performance upgrade going from that spinning disk to that SSD. And then here is the battery that we're going to replace at the same time. Since we're going to open it up, and since it says service battery, we're going to go ahead and take care of that too. Now to get this done, you'll also need a decent screwdriver kit. And I've got with me my trusty Strabetto kit. I use it for all my upgrades. Super cheap on Amazon, like 22 bucks when you catch it on sale. So I'll leave a link to that down below also. And we're going to start off with a 00 bit to open up the bottom cover. So let's go ahead and shut down this computer and flip it over, and we'll start opening it up. Alright, so I powered it completely down, unplugged the power cord, flipped it over, and we can see some signs that this thing was probably bought at a college of some sort. which makes sense. These were very popular college computers, still are. And I've got here this magnetic screw keeper that comes with a Strebito kit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off these 8 screws here, put them on the mat here so I don't lose them. And like I said, I'm using a 00 Phillips head screw tip. So let me go ahead and take off those 8 screws, and I'll meet you back in just a second. So I got 7 of these off, and then this 8th one here is interesting enough. Underneath the sticker that says BKB Tech void if removed. Well, I'm sorry, BKB Tech. We are going to void whatever we're voiding, and we're going to remove this sticker and get that last screw out. Alright, now that I've voided my warranty, I'm going to go ahead and grab right back here by the hinge and just kind of lift straight up. And that's going to unclip a couple things, and this is going to lift right up top. So now we can see the inside, and it's not too dirty. A little bit of dust in here, but we can take care of that. And I may be wrong. This looks like this may have been upgraded at some point or repaired, because usually you see a Hitachi drive in here with the Apple logo on it for the older models. So they may have upgraded the RAM and replaced the hard drive at some point, but we're going to go even further than that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this battery here, and since we're going to change it out anyways, we might as well disconnect it and remove it, and then we'll be safe to do all the other upgrades. Alright, so to remove this battery, we're going to disconnect the connector. We've got a couple tri-wing screws that I'll talk about in a second, and then a couple more Phillips screws. So let's go ahead and disconnect this connector right here first. So basically, if you have a spudger or just any kind of non-conductive item to pry underneath here, you're going to pry underneath this connector here and just disconnect it straight up from the board. And then I usually give it just a tiny bit of a bend backwards so that it sits up and it doesn't, momentarily touch those contacts again. So now the battery's disconnected from the main board, we're going to talk about the tri-wing first. So in my Strebito kit, the bit that works best is called a Y 2.0, and the Y 1.5 also works just as well, but the 2.0 seems to fit pretty good. They call this a tri-wing in some kits, but it's basically just a non-standard bit, because I think Apple doesn't care that you can take apart a laptop, but they want maybe a more qualified person to take apart the battery, remove the battery. So having this magnetic tip is nice for these, because you don't want to accidentally drop them into the main board somewhere where you can't get them. So we got 2 right there, right next to the connector, and then there's a third one that's here underneath this sticker that says, warning, do not remove the battery. So they want to make sure that you're not removing the battery if you don't know what you're doing. So you just kind of peel that back a little bit, this sticker, and this sticker is going to go with the old battery anyway, so it doesn't matter if you tear it up. And we're going to remove this third hidden screw here. Now once you do that, we're going to switch back to that Phillips head, that 00 Phillips head, and we've got 1, 2, 3 more Phillips screws along the front side of the battery here. Now this is something that you don't usually see on the newer style MacBooks. They usually just have something securing the top, and then the bottom is just kind of hinged in. Alright, so even with the right screwdriver bits and everything, I still had one screw that was a little stubborn, and it got stripped out, so I did have to drill that one out. But I'll have one less screw to put in, but I'm not too concerned about that. We should be able to put 2 screws in on the new battery, and it should hold it just fine. So once you get all these 6 screws out of here, then we've got this little plastic tab to help us pull it up and out of the case, and we are done with that. So with the battery out of the way, we can safely proceed with the rest of the upgrade. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and take out this old hard drive here, and we're going to take our Phillips screwdriver again, the 00 Phillips, and take 2 little screws out of this retainer bracket here. We're just going to loosen them up. We're not going to take them all the way out. So loosen them up. They should stay captive inside that little bracket. And once we got those 2 screws loosened all the way up, we should be able to pull this bracket straight up and set it to the side. And now, if it was a stock hard drive, you'd have the little plastic tab right here, just like we did on the battery. So without the plastic tab, you just got to find some way to pull this up. but just realize that the SATA connector is right here, and the SATA connector is just a tiny little ribbon cable that connects to the main board, and it is very brittle. So we're going to gently pull this up so that we're not pulling this away. Now it seems like whoever did this upgrade may have put some kind of adhesive or sticker in here, because the hard drive is actually stuck to the bottom of the case. So let me take care of that and I'll be right back. Alright, so sure enough there was a little adhesive in there, so I took care of that. Basically I took a knife underneath here, not the smartest thing in the world, but just use it to pry up. So I was able to pry that up, and you'll see that adhesive in a second. So normally if you just pulled it up with the tab, it would pull up in this direction, and that's because there's two little studs here that hold it into place into the side of the MacBook here. So here's this small cable, and you can see how skinny it is. So we're just going to kind of use our fingernail here just to pry it away and leave that safely in there. Now if we look at the back side of here, you'll see that there is some sticky double stick tape or something, completely unnecessary. So I don't know why they did that. Also, I'm seeing here that the studs, they don't look like the standard studs that you'd see on these hard drives. So maybe they just shoved something in the side of this hard drive to get it to stick into the stud holes, and that's why he had to reinforce the backside with some, that may even be like non-conductive tape or something. So let me go ahead and see if I've got some more studs for the side here, and when I put the new drive in, I'll do it the right way. Alright, so I did have some spare studs, so I went ahead and pre-installed those on this new hard drive here, and I had another spinning drive from an older laptop that's got the plastic tab, so I'll move that over as well. But I do see why we've got a little issue here, and as it turns out, there's supposed to be little rubber bumpers inside here to hold this side of the hard drive in place, and they're just not there. So I don't know what happened to them, but now I know why. At least they were using some kind of adhesive to hold the drive in place. Now I'm probably going to just go ahead and borrow that and put it back in there, because I'll be able to hold, you know, this side with the retaining bracket, but the front side is just going to be loose. Now the good news is this is no longer a spinning drive, so if it rattles around a little bit, obviously it's not ideal, but it's not going to, you know, destroy any heads or anything in there. So I'm going to set this aside for now. We're going to work on the RAM, and then we'll figure out how we're going to get this hard drive to stay in place. Alright, so I hope the RAM goes a little bit smoother than everything else so far, but this is pretty easy. We've got two little retaining clips here. We're just going to spread those apart with our thumbs. And this first RAM, this top RAM, is going to just pop right up, so we'll set that aside. And then when we pull them apart again, sometimes they get stuck on the first hinge or on the first little clip there, but if you just kind of pull them apart a couple times, then that bottom one is going to spring upward also, and you're going to pull that out at a slight angle. So we're going to do the exact opposite with the new RAM. So you want to make sure that we line up the offset notch on here to the offset here, and we're going to put the bottom one in first. So we're going to kind of go in an angle. Once you get it into that slot, you want to kind of push, you know, wiggle it back and forth a little bit with your thumbs to make sure that it's fully seated inside there, and then we can push it down past that clip and it'll lock in place. Then we're going to take the second one, do the same thing, go in at a slight angle, make sure we get it seated completely in there, and then push that straight down. Now that should be all we need for this RAM. So now let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to get this hard drive back in here. Alright, now because the new hard drive, the new SSD, is a little bit skinnier than the old hard drive, then this thing just isn't going to be enough to hold it in place. So what I'm actually going to do, and this is not ideal again, but I'm just going to take a little piece of cardboard and put it in here just to give it just the right height to mount in there. So the first thing we're going to do is line up the SATA cable. Again, very gently use this cable to plug it in to the new drive. And then I'm going to put my little makeshift hard drive adapter here, and basically just going to line up the two studs into here, and then just kind of hold this in place Now we're going to take this guy and put it back on top. So I'm just going to hold everything in place here and take my 00 Phillips head and go ahead and tighten this retaining bracket back down. And with any luck, it's at least holding one side down. And like I said, once we get this case down here, it's going to hold this in place. And if I need to put another shim on top of here once I put the case down, then I can do that. But I think this is going to be just fine for now. So if anybody in the future ever opens this thing up, please know that I did what I could to make it work. I was only working with what I had. Alright, so now it's time to put the new battery in. And whenever you buy these aftermarket batteries, make sure you read the direction book to find out what the charging cycle should be on the first time, because sometimes they have you discharge it and recharge it several times. And so make sure you follow those directions. That's supposed to condition the battery, give you the best chance at it being a good battery for a long time. So we're just going to put this guy in by putting the front in first and then laying it down this way. We've got our connector here. We're not going to plug that in until we get everything secured. Alright, and we're going to start with the 2 Phillips screws. Remember, we had 3, but one of them got stripped out. So I'm just going to do the far left and the far right one here. Now these, in my case, they look just like all the other ones from the outside of the case, except they were black instead of silver. So I've got 2 of these I'm going to go ahead and put in. Then once you got those in, we're going to go back to the tri-wing, and we've got 1, 2, 3 of those, and those should be your only tri-wings that you have, and they're a little bit longer than the rest of the screws. Alright, now that we got the battery secured in there, we're going to go ahead and attach this connector on here. So you want to kind of line it up first, and then push it all straight down with your thumb. And there we go. So now we're ready to put the bottom case back on. And if you've seen my videos before, you know I like to go ahead and line it all up and put it on there, but don't put the screws in yet, just in case we have to go back in and reseat the RAM, or reconnect the battery if we forgot that. So I just kind of sandwich it with my thumbs, flip it over, and we're ready to boot it up and work on the laptop getting the operating system installed. Alright, so we got everything upgraded in here, and now it's time to figure out this operating system. Now you got 4 main choices of what to do, and I'll talk you through all of them, and then we're going to pick one to do here on the video. So the first thing you can do is you can clone everything from your old hard drive to your new hard drive, either before you do the upgrade or after you do the upgrade. And I've got a video on how to do that. I will link that down in the description below. Now I would only do that if you have a bunch of stuff on the hard drive and a bunch of programs set up the way that you want set up, and it would be too much of a pain in the butt to reset them up on a new hard drive. That's the only reason I would do that. I generally prefer installing a brand new operating system on a brand new hard drive and starting from scratch and installing just what I need and moving over just the files that I need. So clone the hard drive is number 1. The second option would be doing a time machine backup of your old hard drive before you take it out. So you'll need some kind of a USB hard drive to back that up to. It'd have to be at least the same size as the old drive that was in there. So you can do a complete time machine backup, and then once you go to install the new operating system, it'll ask you if you want to restore from that, and you can restore from that time machine. The third option would be doing an internet recovery. And to do internet recovery, you have a couple options where you do a Command R at boot. Now you've got a couple options on that, and I've got a video that explains all the options on internet recovery. I will link that down below also, and that is a good way to do it, and I've done that several times. And then the fourth option is to use a USB thumb drive that's already got the installer built on. So I've got this handy dandy keyring here of basically every version of operating system that macOS has, and I can just use that so that I don't have to go over the internet each time. Now the newest version of macOS that this will run is High Sierra. So you can install Lion, which is what was originally on here, but I would go ahead and suggest go ahead and go all the way up to High Sierra. Now there are ways to do a newer version than High Sierra using a process called Open Core Legacy Patcher, and I've got a video, I can link that down below also, but in this video we're just going to go to High Sierra, which is the newest version of macOS that is supported by Apple. Alright, so I've got my High Sierra install boot disk here. We're going to power on the computer and we're going to hold down the option button, and that should give us an option of what to boot to. Now the internal hard drive, if it was brand new, then it's completely blank and there's nothing on there. So if you booted this up without a thumb drive, you'd get the little folder with the question mark on it. And since it knows there's nothing on there, it doesn't even give us an option at the boot. So by holding the option down, it brings up this option here. Now it wants to connect to a network, because even though the installation is all on this USB drive, it still needs to check for any kind of firmware or any kind of patches along the way. So instead of using Wi-Fi, I'm going to hook up a Ethernet cable, and then I'll be back to set this up in just a second. Alright, so now I'm going to select that install partition there from the thumb drive, and we're going to let that go ahead and boot up into the installation software. Alright, so here we are with the macOS utilities, and we've got options here to restore from Time Machine, like I said before, install macOS if we're going to do a brand new one, and before we do that, I'm going to go into Disk Utility, just to make sure it sees our new hard drive, and yes it does. So it's got, here's our TimeTech 1 terabyte hard drive, and then here's the thumb drive, and then here's basically the virtual operating system it's running right now to do this installation. So let's go back to the internal one here, and we can hit View All Devices, and we can see that there's no partitions on here yet. So let's go ahead and hit Erase, and we're going to go ahead and give it a name. Let's call it macOS. And let's look at our options here. We've got the macOS Extended Journaled, but we're going to go ahead with this APFS, which is a newer version of Apple's file system. And then this scheme is going to be just fine. We'll keep that at GUID. We'll hit Erase, and even though that says Erase, it's basically the format equivalent. So it's going to format that drive and create a partition on there that's going to allow us to install our new operating system. And that's done pretty quick, so we can go ahead and close that disk utility. And now we're ready to go back to install macOS. And it recognized from my drive that it's High Sierra, so we'll hit continue on that. Agree to the terms. And then here's my new partition that I just created, macOS, 1 terabyte total. So we'll hit install on that, and we'll just let it do its thing. Alright, so even with the thumb drive, it still took about 20 or 30 minutes to completely copy over the files and get all the installation stuff ready. It went through a reboot, and then it came back, copied some more stuff, and now we're sitting at the welcome screen, ready to step through the installation of High Sierra. So I'm going to step through all this, and I'll meet you back once we get to the macOS screen. Alright, so here we are with a brand new operating system. Let's check it out to make sure everything installed in correctly. And here it is, macOS High Sierra with 16 gigs of memory. And let's go ahead and take a look at the storage. Here's the macOS partition, 1 terabyte available. And we see the 2 memory sticks, 8 gigs each at 1067 megahertz. So this thing is fully upgraded and ready to go. Now let's just test out Safari real quick to make sure that it can pull up websites. Even though High Sierra isn't the newest, it still works just fine for everything. So this thing seems to be running fine. Seems nice and snappy. I'm sure it's a lot quicker than it was when it was brand new, because it doesn't have this silly spinning drive loading up the programs and everything. So this is a viable laptop to use for whatever you want to use with it. So again, this is not the latest and greatest. This is still a 13-year-old laptop, but performing the way it is pretty darn impressive for that. Now this isn't even a Core i series. This is the old Core 2 Duo series of processors, and it's still running fine. Now there's obviously going to be some limitations about what type of software you install and what type of software you run. You wouldn't want to be editing 4K video on this thing, but for everyday tasks, it's going to be just fine. So I'm happy with the results of this upgrade. Let me know down in the comments below if you think that this is a decent upgrade. Again, with the parts so cheap, it's almost a no-brainer if you want to get one of these things running as quick as you can. Give it to the kids for schoolwork, watch some Netflix on it, whatever you want to do, it's going to be just fine. I'll leave a link to some of the parts that I use down in the description below, so check those out. If you have any questions about anything, go ahead and leave me a comment below and I'll be happy to help you out. And if this wasn't the exact model computer that you have, check out the rest of the channel. I do have some other tutorials on different models of MacBook Pros and MacBook Airs, so you may just find the one that you're looking for. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I appreciate that thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. And thanks as always for watching. And until next time, peace out and geek out.